Yeah, I walk in the room, make the ceiling shake. Gold hoops, fresh fade, got that big boss cake. Never waited on a hand, I'm in my own lane. Told them put some respect when they say my name.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of They Tried It. Of course, I'm your host, Lindiwe Davis, aka The Couch Coach, and I'm so glad that you continue to come back to each one of these episodes as we explore the stories of so many amazing professionals focused on women of color, and really gathering, engaging those adversities and challenges and how they worked through those challenges and are thriving now. If you have not done so, please hit the subscribe button. It's probably a little button popping up at the bottom, or maybe it's just on your screen, but either way, hit the subscribe button. I love your support. I need your support. We are building community. We are building these voices, and I'm super excited for you to be a part of that. Today, we have a lovely guest. We're going to be talking to the wonderful Elizabeth Arnott, and I want her to introduce herself and share a little bit about herself.
Thank you so much, Lindiwe. My name is Elizabeth Arnott. I have worked in HR for about 26 years and kind of worked my way up from HR assistant to an HR director at several different organizations, nonprofits, and government agencies. So that's what I've been doing for the last 26 years. And then this year I started a business that I'm working on to help people navigate through challenging work environments.
I love that. What is the name of the business?
It's Unmanaged.
Unmanaged. Ooh. And why did you choose that name?
It was a moment of frustration, I think, when I was like, nobody's managing anything. And it just felt like, okay, if they're not going to do it, then let's do it ourselves. Like that was my thought process on that.
Is there, thinking about that word in and of itself, let's start from like your origin story. Right? Mm-hmm. You graduate high school. What happens after that?
Okay, so I went to college 2 weeks after I graduated from high school. I could not wait to leave home. I was very excited and went to college, flunked out my sophomore year because I was having so much fun.
Okay.
I would like to say it was, real raucous fun, but I was literally just baking. I just baked all the time and I really loved it. And it took up my time and helped me escape classes. So I flunked out my sophomore year, gradually went back, got my bachelor's degree when I was 28. And then while I was finishing my degree, I got into HR as a temp for an HR outsourcing company doing payroll. And so from there, I started to learn about the people side of the business, payroll, taxes, benefits, all of that kind of stuff. And it really got me interested. And so then my next job after that was with a professional employer organization where they do the HR for like 200 different companies that are their clients. They're the employer of record. Okay. And so we had a lot of consultants, and I basically was an eavesdropper to the consultants. I was an HR assistant. I was sitting on one side of the cubicle and the consultants would be on the other side. And I would just be like engrossed in their conversations, how they would advise people, how they talk to people. And I just like took it all in. I was going to school for an English degree, so it wasn't related, but I found myself really interested in this concept of I have a problem at work and I'm calling someone to help me. Yeah. And this person can give me advice that will calm me down in the moment. And I remember that first job, they had a phone they called it the bat line, but it was like an emergency line for clients to call. And we always have a contest of who could pick it up the fastest. And I won all the time because I was so excited to talk to the clients and see what I could help them with. Okay. My goal was always like to learn a little bit more from every situation. So from there, I really grew. I moved up to be an HR assistant and then an HR representative. And then I left that job and became an HR manager for one of their clients at a manufacturing site. So that was kind of the beginning of my HR career.
That is, first of all, that's a hell of a journey coming out of college and landing in an environment where the phone, it's called the bat phone, which in fact should lend itself to people understanding that we are here to help people and quote unquote save the day for the most part. What have you learned, or what did you learn, and what do you remember about that time when you got into the space? What were some things that you were seeing at that time, And are they still the same things that you see now?
Yeah, there were a couple of situations that I remember observing and hearing about when I was in that job where, for example, I think I remember there was a company that had a person who was going to go through transgender transition surgery.
Mm-hmm.
And this was in the early 2000s. And I remember my bosses having conversations with those folks and saying, like, this is what you need to do to protect yourself legally. Like, you need to accept this person. You need to like train the employees. If there's going to be a problem, we need to make sure that they understand what's going on with this person's involvement so that they have a say in how it's being talked about. And the company came back and said, we're just not ready for this.
Okay.
And they ended up letting the employee go.
Wow.
And that really stuck with me because even though like I wasn't as educated then as I am now on all of those things, it really just struck me that, wow, this company not ready to deal with this. And so the employee who has only ever been a great employee presents a challenge and they say, no, thanks.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, it was just a really stark contrast between what I believed in that we should be welcoming and inclusive to everyone. And yes, it might be hard at first, but if we don't speak up in these moments, that's when things get really bad. That's when things really, people don't understand what's happening.
Yeah,
and so they fill in the blanks, you know? That was one. And then I remember another one of sexual harassment situation where one of the executives had been like literally groping the employees at a Christmas party. And I remember hearing the consultant say, you know, the best practice here is to terminate their employment because it is egregious.
Right.
Did not happen.
Oh, wow.
The company made the decision to keep the person there. Okay. And so I started noticing this, I guess it's favoritism towards the power, but it's really just the power dynamic that we all see, right? People who have power, they are the ones that make the decisions. And they generally, what I was seeing is that they were generally making the decisions to protect themselves before they were protecting their employees.
That's right.
And as I got higher, as my positions got higher, I started seeing that more. Mm-hmm. More and more, like if an executive or a manager crossed a line, if they were held accountable, which was rare, if they were, it was quite disproportionate to what had actually happened.
Yeah.
So, okay, someone retaliated against this person. Okay, don't do that again. Like that's the response. And it's just not okay. Like you have this person in power and you have these individuals who are there to earn a living, to feed their families, to take care of themselves. And you have people who are abusing their power and taking advantage of these people. And it makes me, I get very enraged. Like it's just, because it's not fair. It's
rightfully so.
And also these companies would not exist without the employees. And this is what just floors me about the audacity of it is they wouldn't even exist if they didn't have those employees.
That right there is it's such a great reminder in Jim, Elizabeth, that how is it that this connection point is consistently lost in workspaces or in industry, that without the employee, the company wouldn't necessarily be operating, right? Yeah. And they wouldn't be operating at the capacity in which the company requires its employees to show up, hence making folks that are in quote unquote executive leadership roles rich or richer or bonuses, et cetera, et cetera. Like that alignment really should be so clear that you would want to assist the employee. However, HR is not set up for that. In fact, I think most people are waking up to the notion, especially in the now times, that HR is really a buffer between the public and their image, right? Yeah. And how they're presenting themselves in and of itself. And so the protection mechanism is not necessarily for the employee, That's not to say that some people like yourself and others who have worked in HR who are trying to hold the line and create that boundary to ensure that people are cared for. But 9 times out of 10, like you said before, even as you rose, you started to see more and more of these dynamics not be fleshed out in a way that's super helpful to employees.
Yeah. Yeah.
Do you think with that journey coming out of school, going into this field, starting to notice as you rose from being an assistant to a manager and really leading full-on teams, that people were different towards you when you started to challenge these notions?
Oh, yes, absolutely. So what immediately, like I've always been a person who I love engaging with people. I love learning from people.
Yeah.
And I believe that every single person has value, that you can learn from every single person on this earth. So like, I don't buy this group is more valuable than this group. Like
Right.
to me, we're all the same. And as I started seeing it, the more I, confidently grew in my knowledge and my experience, I would start to speak up and say, hey, that looks like retaliation, or that looks like discrimination. And
Right.
a lot of times the managers or the leaders would get personally offended.
Yeah.
Like I remember having a conversation with a manager because she had decided to do an investigation on this one employee on his Lyft rides that he took in the course of his job. And she looked up and saw that he was driving, or that he was catching a Lyft from home, which was not something that was supposed to be done in the policy. So she calls me and says, I want to write this person up. This is an egregious violation. These are all the risks. And I say, okay. And then I ask her one question.
Okay.
What does this look like for all the other employees that are using Lyft? Oh, well, she hadn't looked at them yet. And this employee was the only Black employee that we had.
Yeah.
And as I sat with her and I said to her, I want to help you understand how this looks. And I'm not saying that you intended to be this, to be discriminatory, but I need you to understand that these are the patterns that we see that establish racism in the workplace.
Right.
And she was very offended and was like, how dare you call me racist? And it was very challenging. I'm sitting here as the HR person. I don't really have any authority, right? I'm just here to tell her, this is what you've done wrong.
Right.
But to be met with, how dare you? It's not only just that interaction, then she doesn't trust me anymore.
Yeah.
Come back to me with more problems.
Absolutely.
Because she doesn't want to be called out.
That's right.
So it's sort of sabotaging myself, but I felt very strongly like that this is how things need to be dealt with. Like I'm a very open person. I will overshare more often than not, but I just feel like let's get the information out there and then we make the best decision that we can. Yeah, I noticed employees started trusting me more and leaders started distrusting me.
Isn't that the interesting dynamic that develops when you are the type of person that challenges systems?
Yes.
You would think it would be something that's much more collective, right?
Yeah.
That there should be this collective and connective tissue between employees, leadership, HR, right? And how outcomes are being produced through those three parties, but that's just not the case. And let's dig into that a little bit more, how employees begin to trust folks that work in HR simply by reviewing their actions and not just their words.
Yeah, it's powerful. In my last job that I was in, and I have to be careful how I talk about this, but there had been sort of an absence of value in the HR department. It was very clearly hadn't been valued in the past. And when I started, I was like, okay, let's transform this, because I'm always up for a good transformation. Like, let's start, And so I immediately start going out and meeting the employees because there was a lot of mistrust. There'd been lawsuits and people really didn't feel safe. And I remember sitting in my office one day and this professor coming in and talking to me and saying, in 30 years, you're the first person who has listened to me and has listened to my concerns about these different, discriminatory actions. And I felt incredibly honored, but also just angry because there is no reason that a problem has to go on for 30 years without being addressed when it's like an open secret. And, this is when I started to get fatigued in the HR area because I was just like, I felt like I was running up a very steep hill all of the time.
Yeah.
Because no matter how I explained it to the folks in power, I could not change their perspective that what they said was not only what goes, but also what was the truth. And that is not how I roll.
Right.
And that's just not what I do. So I'm going to put everything in detail and take detailed notes and make sure that we're following compliance. And, when I get pushback on that, that says to me about the organization, and it's not just one organization that's happened in, but many of they're protecting their power over the purpose of the organization, over anything else. And when you work in nonprofits, it's just amazing. Like there are so many toxic work environments in nonprofits because they expect people to be dedicated. They expect people to devote their lives to it. And they do. And they don't complain. And then they're underpaid and they're overworked and they get burned out. And then they make silly decisions that get the organization in trouble. And it happens again and again and again. And seeing that kind of pattern without being able to interrupt it is really frustrating.
I can imagine. And I don't even have to imagine it. When I think about my work life and the decades I've been in workspaces and professional environments, no matter the industry, the string is still the same, right? Yes. I have this statement where I say one of my favorite statements is from myself, of course, is that it doesn't matter what decade I've been in or what year I've been in, I've seen the same person just in a different iteration on a yearly basis, no matter the industry. Meaning the behavior is going to be there regardless of what year you're in. It just comes in a different package. So I'm never too surprised by things happening in a company that are happening to a person because I've seen it in some form or variation prior to the innovation of AI, prior to the horrificness of George Floyd, prior to, et cetera, et cetera. And so when you think about these things, this connective tissue and connection points, where are you in with regard to the things that you've learned all these years, right? You've seen so many things. You've seen stories. You've had these interviews with people who came to you for help. Is there something that has stood out either within those stories or for yourself? Is there an adversity or a challenge that has come to your door and you said, you know what, I'm going to just go ahead and stand up?
Yeah. And this was the situation at my last job. I've been in HR for so long and seen the same things over and over again. Mm-hmm. This was a time when I feel like I take a lot of pride in being in HR and being an ethical practitioner of HR.
Oh, say it again, Elizabeth. What?
An ethical practitioner of HR. I feel like if something is going wrong and I don't feel comfortable reporting it as the HR director, there's something wrong with the system because I should be able to report my concern just like everyone else. That's and right. I've already had one bad experience reporting an HR boss where I was immediately pushed out. And I'm tired of it. Mm-hmm. I was tired of it. And I was tired of the abusive power and of people not being held accountable. It just made me angry. So going into this job, I thought it was going to be transformative. And then about a year in, my boss I started noticing that he was raising his voice and pounding on the desk. Oh. Anytime he felt strongly about something, he wasn't necessarily angry. Yeah. But I have a history of trauma. And when that happens, my brain shuts off. I can't even hear what you're saying. So it's not an effective communication method, regardless of what he thought. So I told him specifically in writing,
Mhm.
I need you please to stop yelling and pounding on the desk. I understand that you're not angry when you're doing that,
Right.
but because of my previous experiences, I can't hear what you're saying. And I
Mhm.
immediately go into fight or flight.
That's right.
So the next time this happens, I'm likely going to need to walk out of the room.
Mhm.
And he was like, okay, yeah, no problem. And then he continued.
Okay.
It just came back. And after every interaction, I emailed him in writing. This is what you did. This is how it impacted me. I
Yeah.
need you please to stop repeatedly, just over and over again.
Elizabeth, did you ever get the feeling that was the way he was for all meetings and for all interactions with people in professional spaces?
I had seen him be that way in large meetings and in small meetings.
Yeah.
One particular incident when I first started working there, I was having a meeting with him, and this was before things got complicated between us, but another director walked in, and I don't even know what they were talking about. I was just looking at my notes while they were chatting, and then suddenly they both started yelling.
Oh.
And they were just yelling. And then the one director said, okay, thanks, bye. And he turned around and walked out. And my boss was like, okay, where were we? And I was like, what just happened? Like, why is this a communication method that we're using?
Right. And why was anyone pulling up the fact that this is not how we should be talking to each other? Not only is it not effective, Elizabeth, but is everybody in the meeting traumatized and or toxic? Is this a trait that that people have in general?
Well, no, I don't think so. But I think he was the second in charge at the institution. So what he did, it gave permission for everyone else to do the same thing.
Wow.
And that's often how toxic environments are created, because leaders aren't aware, or they don't want to be aware of their impact on other people. So,
first of all, that's such a great call out in and of itself, that when behavior is allowed to continue, it does signal that this is the way that the team moves. I've heard people tell me things like, oh, yes, I was on a team where, people were simply rude, and the higher up was like, oh, yeah, I know they're rude.
Yeah.
As in, oh, yeah, it's okay because they're getting work done, but it's not okay, because that's not a natural, normal behavior to have when you're interacting with people. If you're going to be rude just to be rude, or if you're going to be disrespectful just to be disrespectful, that's not right. So you've called these things out. You've asked to set this boundary around communication styles. You've let him know, hey, my communication style, this is how I speak. I'd love to invite you into that style, is what I'm gathering from you, that you were trying to invite him in to graduate a little bit more. What happens next after those several instances?
So I always tried to be really polite and professional, but also be very clear and direct, so that there was no misunderstanding. Like, you are harming me.
Yeah.
And I think I even spelled that out like a couple of times. You are harming me by your interactions, because, being in HR, I know you want to document everything like very well. So that's what I did. So I decided to report it to the president, because that's the only other person. And I was like, this is the chain of command. This is what the handbook says to do. So that's what I'm going to do.
Yeah.
And the president was a female at the time, which made me feel, I assumed things based on her gender. As a woman who knows about internalized misogyny and all of that, I still made assumptions as a woman that she would respond in a certain way.
Right.
And what she did is she said, I talked to him and he told me he will never yell in the workplace again.
Okay.
And even by her saying it, the way she framed it, to me, I felt like, okay, that is performative accountability. Like, that's not real. And also to say, like, I will never yell in the workplace again. Really?
Right.
When you yell on a daily basis and there's no more to the conversation than that, that's not accountability.
Right.
And it was right after that my communication got restricted. So my boss said that I could no longer communicate with the executive team, and he gave no explanation for these changes. Okay. But I had to go through him. And things started happening like that. He would leave me out of meetings about layoffs or things like that. Like things where clearly HR should be in the room talking about it because of the compliance aspects and things like that. And it just got worse and worse. And then in January of 2025, that's when things really escalated. And I would say it's probably the moment I realized that I needed to get out. Was I was in my office one day sitting at my desk, and I had like a bowling alley office. It was like long and narrow. So I was sitting at my desk in the front, and he came in, slammed the door. It's very narrow. And he's standing up in front of me. And he says, "This HR process is out of control." And I said, my standard response was, "Okay, I understand that you're frustrated. Let me tell you what the federal law says that we have to do." And he scrunched up his face and said, "Blah, blah, blah. I don't want to hear your legal bullshit."
Okay.
And I was completely taken off guard because I have worked in a lot of places. I have never had someone act like that in my face.
Right.
In the workplace. And he was pacing back and forth in front of the door while he was yelling. And, you know, if you've been in trauma and they're blocking the exit, like, get out. Like, all I could say in my head was like, get out, I was screaming. I was panicking in my head, not out loud, but until I could get him to leave. And so then he left. But I sat at my desk for like an hour after that incident, crying and really kind of reckoning with the question of, is this me or is this him?
Right.
And I'm someone who's very particular about self-reflection. Like, I try to do it at the end of every day. What have I done today? Is it in line with my values? Like that kind of thing. And so I sit there and I think, did I do anything to provoke this? Is there anything possible that I could change that would make this go better? And I came to the conclusion that I don't think so. Like, I don't think that it's me. Like, I am interacting as professionally as I know how.
Right.
And his response is to get angry. It's not when I made mistakes that he got angry and started yelling. It's when I told him things he didn't know. And that's when he got the angriest. And so I clocked that pattern. And then I was like, okay, I really got to think about leaving. But I was the sole breadwinner for the family. We had just rented a house. Like, I needed to stay for a little bit. So I did the best I could. But it was very clear that I was unwell. And I managed a team of 4 people, and I was impacting them too. And that's, I think, my biggest regret from the situation, because they didn't ask for that.
Is there, when you think about this, situation, you go back in time, you're reviewing the executive coming to you and saying, "Oh, yes, he's apologetic," but it was quite performative because, to your point, you thought that her being identifying as the same gender as as you would hope that women are sticking together. It's an age-old thought process that, yes, we should stick together. But, unfortunately, we always find out that sometimes that's not the case, right? And we're often disappointed by that, your real feelings. I do want to ask the question around, for people watching and for anyone that happens to be in HR, either starting out or they may have some antiquated ways. What could have happened in that moment when she actually took that information to him, instead of him saying, "Oh, yes," or her saying to you, "Oh, yes, he's going to stop doing it"? What's something that could have been different from that interaction?
Yeah, from my perspective, I would expect a conversation with the supervisor and the person, that in this case, the president and the CFO, saying, "I need you to understand how your behavior is impacting the people that work for you. And it's impacting them to such a degree that they're having trouble doing their work."
Yes.
Now, since I left, I've had 3 other people come to me and say that they've had similar situations with this person. So it wasn't me. And if it had been addressed in that way at the beginning, none of those other people would have been hurt.
That's right.
But so that's what could have happened. And that's what should have happened.
Yeah. it's always the after effect of these things, because the moment you almost feel like having a crazy moment, like you're in some sort of mythical land where this could not possibly be happening.
Yes.
And to your point, we all do this thing, particularly as women as well, where we ingest this information and we ask these questions, oh, is it me? Which is a trauma response for the most part.
Yep.
It's almost as if we're always looking to give the other person the out, you know?
Yep.
When they don't actually deserve the out or need the out, they need the accountability. As you, going back to this last part of the story that you were explaining, that you felt like you had to stay, what were some of the things that you did to get your mind in a place to say, all right, I followed up with the executives who were in leadership who know that this is problematic behavior. I have said time and time again what is respectful and what's not. I've done a good job at this place. Okay, I got to stay for a little bit longer. Is there something that you feel like you would have wanted to do differently now that you're on the outside looking in?
Yes. Very specifically, I had never learned really how to regulate my nervous system in crisis.
Yeah.
And after I'd been out for several months and I was starting to heal, I really realized that when I was not regulated, and that made the entire situation worse.
Okay.
Not that I did anything wrong, but just that my response instigated a defensive response from them. I was very emotional all the time, which I'm sure was really annoying.
Yeah.
That's just what it was.
Yeah.
So I was dysregulated, which meant I could not discern between noise and information.
Okay.
So everything was just coming in at once, and I was trying to, it just made everything worse. And then I couldn't access the knowledge that I had around emotional intelligence. Like, this is how my behavior is impacting my team as a result of what I'm going through. So those are the three things that I was missing: nervous system regulation, emotional intelligence, and critical thinking. Being able to do those things in crisis would have really grounded me and perhaps given me a little bit of a better exit path.
Yeah, absolutely. You, again, another great gem around emotional intelligence being a part of one's intelligence around handling situations, regulating your nervous system. That's such a great call out, because a lot of times, again, the body will kick into fight or flight when any adversity or challenge pops up, whether it's something physical, whether it's something verbal, etc. And so really understanding where you are in those moments, because you have practice, which, I hate to say that that's a thing, but in real life, we all have to build up practices as a direct result of our experiences.
Absolutely,
right?
yeah.
Good, bad, or indifferent. And then that critical thinking aspect where you do have to figure out what is the noise and what is the information, because the noise is not going to give you too much to go off on. In fact, it'll give you something to either overreact on or underreact on, whereas information is something you can stick a tent pole in. That's something that you can build a foundation from. So I'm glad that you called those things out. When you figured out, all right, I stayed, I did everything I could, how did you get out?
I went to the president, and this is after, this is after they had tried to do a mediation, but it wasn't a mediation. They had a coach basically that was coaching me on how to have executive presence, and was not meeting with my boss at all. So there was no mediation. I realized what was happening is that, no, this is not repair. This is making this my fault.
Right.
And
spinning a narrative.
Yes. And so that was my last straw, because I had put in so much work to try to get things done in this job, to try to fit in, to try to meet expectations that were constantly vague and changing. And I just had enough. So I went to the president, and as I do with like any high risk termination, I created a document where I listed all of the risks of my personal situation in the organization.
Yeah.
I gave it to the president, and he looked at it and was like, well, what's that? And I said, well, this is a list of liabilities that the organization could have based on my experience here and how I've been treated.
Yeah.
And he's like, liabilities for what? And he just kind of tossed it aside. And then he's like, so is today your last day or what? And so he was done with me.
Why? Wow.
And so I left. I actually went on medical leave the next day and then ended my employment a month later.
Okay. And did you end up walking away negotiating any type of packaging, or were you able to at least try to put that into motion? Because again, when your hand is being forced, the only other thing you can do is to try to negotiate your way out.
Right. So I hired an amazing attorney who really helped me a lot. My problem was that I had brain fog so bad from the constant trauma that I could not understand exactly what she was saying and why. And so she said, do not quit, because if you quit, you give up all of your leverage.
Yeah.
But I remember sitting at my desk and just feeling like I have to run out of here. Like I have to get out. I can't not quit. Like I just couldn't handle it anymore. And so I made the decision to go ahead and resign. And that kind of sabotaged my attempt at negotiating out because I'd given my leverage. But it was something I needed to do to feel safe in the moment. And in that moment, that's what was more important. So I negotiated a small severance and agreed not to sue and released all the claims against them. But in Oregon, there's the Workplace Fairness Act, which prohibits employers from non-disclosure, non-disparagement, and no rehire clauses in separation agreements. And so I knew that my rights were preserved to be able to speak about it. And because I feel so strongly about HR and how it can help companies when it's functional and valued in the proper way for what we can add to the company, it can be really powerful. So I really felt like I needed to speak out. And so after I got my severance that same day, I went home and I wrote a letter to the accreditation board because I knew that their accreditation was coming up. And so I wrote a letter and detailed all of the issues with the compliance with the accreditation requirements that I had seen. And I tied, because I couldn't disclose anything confidential from my position, I very specifically tied each concern to a personal experience that I had at work, which was so horrific that I could actually just pull from many different things and illustrate all the points that I needed to make.
Yeah. What a journey, because in and of itself, you made such a great point about reminding people that when you are in any company and something adverse or challenging is happening, one of your biggest pieces of leverage is the fact that you're still at the company. And whatever the capacity is, whether you're on leave, etc. Right? Which, by the way, people that are watching, if you're not using your medical leave, I would advise you to do so, especially when you really do hit burnout, when you feel overwhelmed. If there is an option to take leave, please do so, because your safety really is a priority. And because it's a benefit, you should tap into that benefit. Don't ever feel like you don't have permission to do so.
Absolutely. And a lot of states have paid leave now too.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think the other call out here is that you did your best to try to stay, to ensure that you have some sort of severance in and of itself. And you got an attorney to give that advice, right? And so that's such a good thing for folks to remember, that even if you don't know how to navigate certain spaces and places, regardless of anything, you should have an attorney. Is that probably a thought process that sounds right?
Yeah, I would say just be cognizant that, like with my case, my attorney graciously took it on contingency. And what that meant is that she got 30%, which she earned, right? But like when you're talking about being without a job for a long time, like you really need to take that into consideration. So when I got 3 months of severance, what I ended up getting was much less than that. But that's just the way the cookie crumbled in this situation, because I did the best I could with what I had. But so that's something to remember, is that, the attorney always gets a big chunk if you do it on contingency. And if you can pay cash up front, it's going to be cheaper usually.
Yeah. That's a fair point. Thinking back now, is there anything that you would necessarily change? Is there anything specific that you feel like, you know what? Now that I know what I know, this is maybe something I would change, but it worked out the way that it was going to work out?
I don't think there's anything that I would change. Like, I am really proud of how I stood up for myself. And
Yeah.
aside from like just the reflections of, yeah, I was dysregulated. I made some poor decisions. I think actually the one thing is that I would really address the concerns with my staff, because as I was meeting with them, they were having concerns about me.
Yeah.
And I didn't really handle that very well.
Mm-hmm.
But when you're on the
Mm-hmm.
verge of tears all the time, it's just difficult.
Absolutely, especially when you have other people's livelihood at stake and you're just trying to balance your own, because that's what's at stake for you is your
Yeah.
livelihood. I really like the part around courage, right? Because you and I were just talking before we started recording. And one of the things that's super important just in my life in general is reminding people that your level of courage is going to be your level of courage, and your level of activation is attached to that. Meaning, if there's a scale when it comes to courage, if there was a scale from 1 to 10, I'm probably sitting at an 8.5, almost a 9, not quite, where someone else may be at a 3, right?
Yep.
So their activation level could be, I'm going to file this complaint, or it could be, I'm going to file an anonymous complaint,
Yep.
right? And maybe they'll leave it at that.
Yep.
But someone in the middle may do something different. And someone that's on the quote unquote top side of the scale at an 8 or 9, they're going to go as far as they need to go, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Situation in order to try to remedy the situation. And I think it's great to see people's stories and how they play out per their level of courage, because it's not, oh, you weren't courageous enough or you were too courageous.
No.
It's the fact that you even had that you
Yes.
tapped into
Yes.
your own courage and activation. That's the part that I think is super key. What feels like thriving right now? How are you thriving? What does that word mean to you now?
In a lot of ways, I'm so free. I
Yeah.
feel, because I really did feel trapped there. I am thriving now by really thinking through my actions during that situation and how I could have impacted it to be better for myself. Again, not that I did anything wrong, but just how can I better navigate it? And I started writing on Substack and really kind of processing through everything through writing. And I developed these 10 pillars of learning and unlearning skills that can help us, again, regulate our nervous systems, use critical thinking with emotional intelligence. And I am loving it. I am learning so much.
Yeah.
Just from looking at myself, from reading about neuroplasticity and the very cool brains we have and how they can be rewired. And you can have a bad work experience. You can even be fired and you can still come back from it.
That's right.
And I think that's the message that I want to give to people, is that you don't have to give up yourself, your identity, your values while you're in a toxic work situation. Like, there are tools you can use to survive a little better. And I'm not saying it's a solution, but survive a little better. And my ultimate goal is if we could get all employees, or if we can get this kind of training implemented in every workplace, regardless of what the leaders do, because they're the hardest to change. But if as an employee base, we all learn these skills, eventually we're going to be the leaders, right?
That's right.
Then we can have better workplaces. We can have leaders who are educated in all of these things, how to have a psychologically safe workplace, how to do, trauma-informed leadership, of those things that really make people thrive in the workplace, being the best they can at what they do as their authentic self.
I love that the discovery part is what's coming out of this, that this deeper discovery of you and matching that with your experiences and developing a learning from that is golden in and of itself. Because something very key you just said, people that are not in leadership roles, but that are striving to be, really do need this education. Because you're right, you cannot change somebody. It is very difficult to change someone who is quote unquote already in a leadership role, garnering themselves with the title of I'm a leader, but they don't know anything about people. They have no cultural competency. They were placed there by way of someone knowing them or because of some nefarious other reason that they got there. And this is not for all leaders, but for the people that we are talking about, it is difficult to get them to change their mind, and you can only lead them so far, right? Tell people how to find you.
You can find me by email at elizabeth@unmanagedpeople.com and my website, unmanagedpeople.com. I'm on Substack and Blue Sky and all the socials. So
Love that.
yeah, love
And
it.
you're available for consulting and all of those things, correct?
I am consulting and individual strategy sessions. We're going to do some group things coming up. So yeah, I'm constantly kind of developing and reinventing what I have until I hit the sweet spot. So
I love that. Elizabeth, it has been a pleasure talking to you today.
you too. Thanks for allowing me to share my story.
No problem. I mean, everybody, my whole thing has always been, everybody's story is super important, even if you think it's a small story or a big story or a little story. Stories are important and it gives people an opportunity to not feel like they're on an island, right?
Yes, absolutely.
So I thank you so much for all of you watching. Thank you so much for continuing to support the show. Bring your friends, tell your friends, tell the people in HR, tell the employees, whatever industry you're in, there's something here for you. Go support Elizabeth and all of the guests I've had on the show. They are striving, thriving, and moving forward. And don't forget to support me because I really do need it more than you know. You can find me on the socials, Lindiwe_speaks, of course, LindiweDavis.com, and tap into LinkedIn. I've got a series called They Tried It Fridays, and there's some more stuff coming out that I'm in development of. We're always moving. But thank you all so much for tuning in. Have a wonderful, wonderful week, day, month, year, and I'm rooting for you. Cheers.
Never gonna stop. No cosign needed, I've been self-made. If you cut from my cloth, that's designer grade. Level up every year, new